Yeah. Well, my name is Rob, and I am at Canvas Church in Kalispell, Montana. I'm the director of Canvas School of Ministry. I'm also the church host sometimes. Anybody host, which is basically a glorified word for doing the announcements. Anybody? Okay. But I also do other pastoral things at Canvas Church just for fun. If you do something other than the partnership program, like if you have a different job at your church other than the partnership program, stand up. Yeah, that's awesome. You can go ahead and sit back down. I just wanted to get you to move around a little bit too. We're waking everybody up. Isn't that crazy? I think we all have different jobs that we're doing. Raise your hand if you do young adults. Okay, raise your hand if you do youth. Raise your hand if you do worship. Any worship? Yeah, there we go. So a lot of us have our jobs are spread out. This morning, I get the opportunity to share a little bit about setting up your internship. How do you set your internship up for success? And by no means do I have all of the answers. I've been at Canvas Church just a couple years. A little bit about me. I've got a slide that I think is gonna pop up. I've been at Canvas Church just about a year and a half. Prior to that, I was a youth pastor. I was a worship youth pastor combo at a smaller church in Oregon, and I had an opportunity to have summer interns through the Oregon Youth Alive Ministry Academy, which is called the Oyama program, and it was through Northwest University through their Salem campus. And so I had an opportunity to be a pastor and have interns through the summer. But then also I've been at Canvas Church and have loved being primarily, I'd say 90% of my job gets to be Canvas School of Ministry, which I think is fairly unique. Because a lot of us, like I said, are doing youth ministry or young adults or worship or other things. So that's a picture of my family there, my wife Maggie, son Judah, and Eli. I don't know about you, but when I got on an airplane to come here, it was like relaxing. Like, whoa, I don't have a stroller and a car seat and 3,000 bags hanging off me. I'm like, I have one bag. I'm like, the whole time I'm like, am I forgetting something? Like, what do I not have? So I love being a dad, having a family, but it's nice to come to an event like this. It's nice to come and focus in. I'm excited to learn from you guys. I'm excited to be here and learning from you guys. I was telling Kristen on our way here, I said that we go to so many conferences for youth. We go to conferences for all kinds of other things to promote. But this is for us. Like, we get to learn at this conference. We get to ask questions. We get to grow our program, grow our knowledge and understanding. So I'm really excited to get some time this weekend to learn from you guys as well. So prior to being at Canvas School of Ministry, I was a worship pastor, youth pastor. And then 4 years prior to that, I was a teacher. And I taught high school, middle school. I have a master's degree in education. I'm actually working on my doctorate in education as well. So I'm in it for another 3.5 years. Yeah. Woo! Taking a research class right now. It's good. I'm trying to be a good example to my students. They're like, I got to get my homework done. I'm like, yeah, me too. I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it. So, cool. So I want to start off by talking, what do you do before school even starts? Raise your hand if you are just setting up your program. Like, you have never had a program before, you're setting it up. I think we have a good amount in here. Okay, if you have a program set up, hopefully this will be some good reminders for you, but also if you're brand new setting up your program, what are some things that you need to do? So we can head over to that slide before school starts, that first one. Perfect. I've got some QR codes throughout my talk, and you're welcome to grab your phone. And if you use your camera on a lot of phones, it'll pull up different things as we're talking through. But before school starts, the first thing you need to know is, what is Northwest University's requirements? We want to make sure that we are maintaining our accreditation, and so you've got to make sure that you are meeting those requirements. One thing that I would encourage too is you can go above those requirements, but you don't have to, and I think sometimes programs overthink it, and they're like, I've got to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. It's like, for the accreditation, what is it that you need to have? You need to have 8 to 12 hours, okay? There's a new tool this year that's very helpful, and Becca's got an awesome video that explains all of those NU requirements. There's a meeting that they want you to have at the beginning with the students, meeting at the end. There's a little journal requirement throughout the process as well. It's a phenomenal tool to use to just help get you started with what are those requirements for Northwest University. And so I'm not going to talk a ton about about that. But just know the Northwest University requirements. If you don't know them, want to point you towards that Becca's video for that. My biggest question for you is, who's leading your internship? When I worked at a church, it was all we had 3 interns in the summer, and for a while, it was like our associate pastor was kind of the leader, but I was the youth pastor, and so sometimes he'd send the interns to me, but I didn't really know if I was in charge of them, and I couldn't. Anybody relate to that? Anybody like it's kind of confusing. It's not. For my personality, I want to know who's in charge, okay? That's just my personality. And so if I'm the intern lead, then I'm the intern lead. I'm keeping them accountable. I've got my syllabus. I'm running through the program. If my youth pastor is the intern lead, then you can hand that off to a youth pastor. You could hand it off to a worship pastor. You could hand it off to another pastor. Just understand that, like you, they've got 1,000 other things that are on their mind, and probably internship is pretty down here. Okay, so you got to be established first. Who is leading this internship? Are you leading it? Is your worship pastor leading it? Is your youth pastor leading it? Is your associate pastor leading it? Who is leading your internship? A lot of times, too, like our creative team, we have a creative team with 3 people on our staff that do video and graphics and website, and so we have a creative internship. And last year, they were like, all 4 of us are going to be the intern lead. And I'm like, well, that's great, but then that means the interns have 4 bosses, okay? And so I like to say, which one of you out of your 4 are going to be the lead? I like to very clearly establish who is the lead. How many students do you anticipate having? We were having a great conversation last night, and somebody's like, yeah, I think we're going to have like 5. And just kind of like the talk we heard this morning, if you plan for 5, you'll get 3. So plan for 20. And you'll have 5. So like, go, hey, we're gonna have 20. Speak it, talk it into existence, and shoot for the moon. And then if you say, yeah, let's have 30 students, and then you'll have 10 or 15. One thing that I would say before school starts that we really try to do is throughout the application process, we have a few more steps that we add out of that funnel. Okay, so you saw the funnel up there. Our first step is our Canvas School of Ministry application. You can go to our website and check that out if you want to. It's very easy, okay? And we want to make it as easy as possible for students to make that first step. And then after they've filled that out, I call them, I talk to them, it's immediate, and then we send them to the Northwest University application. And so I say, we're so excited to have you. This is awesome. Lori's going to send you an email with all these next steps of what to do. And so we have like a little bit of an extra step there as far as our application process goes. Cool. But I would say create time to listen to your students' stories even before they show up at your internship. Next slide. Before school starts, one thing I would recommend all of you to have is a lifestyle agreement. Now, Northwest University has one. It's very big, and it's required for all of our students to read it. I hope that they do. We all have one for our School of Ministry that we've created as well that's a little bit shorter and a little bit more concise. Clear is kind, and so you want to make it very clear what lifestyle agreements they're agreeing to by being in your program. And you can set this up in a bunch of different ways. I want to create a time of discussion. So if you've got a few people around you, what are some things that you would say are the top 5 things that you need to put on your lifestyle agreement? If you have one, what are some things that are on yours? If you don't have one, what are some things that you should have on it? So go ahead and discuss in groups like 2, 3. Would stay social distance, but I want to give you just a couple minutes to discuss lifestyle agreements. On your marks, I go.
And I've seen so much, still I'm certain that the best is not yet come. Sing. 'Cause Jesus, you're not done with me. You're doing a new thing. You're doing a new thing. And I see a wave of revival preceded by justice and praise. We're young and the old run to Jesus. Oh, and all the sins that held us back are laid to waste.
Just a couple minutes. We'll bring it back in. Okay. Love hearing this conversation, discussion. Want to give you time to share. What are some things that came up? You can just shout it out, or you don't have to raise your hand. What are some things that you discussed at your table that you think should be on your lifestyle agreement? Social media representation. That's a great one. What else? Sexual ethics, very good. What do you mean? You can't live with your boyfriend and be in a partnership program? What else? Drugs and alcohol. Can they drink alcohol if they're 30 and they're in your program? Something you need to clarify. I don't know, that's up to you. Okay, but I would recommend, what else? What other things? Dating, health and wellness. I love that topic of dating. Somebody asked me that question. Do you allow your students to date? The partnership or the internship I was a part of in Oregon said no, you cannot date in your first year that you're there. And what happened was, you may have something similar to this. What happens is they all secretly date anyway. Okay, so what I say at CSM is I highly recommend, when my interns come in the first week, it's like, highly recommend you don't date for the first semester at least, maybe not the first year. And that's what I say I highly recommend, because they are adults, okay? They're not youth kids, they're adults. And so if you tell them they can't, then they're gonna want to even more. It's like if I tell you, whatever you do, don't think about a purple elephant. It's like, what did we all do? We all just thought about a purple elephant, right? So I think sometimes with this lifestyle agreement, you don't want to become legalistic, but you do need to have a very clear set of expectations and standards for your program. And why is that? Because there's going to be a time down the road when somebody's going to do something, and you can go back to the thing and say, hey, remember you signed this? And so we need to have a conversation. And so it just gives you a little bit more weight, and it makes it very clear of what they know that they're signing up for before they even get there. Our housing agreement, because we do have housing, we have a few apartments, our standards are more strict for our students living in our housing than for, let's say, a 50-year-old that is in our flex program, okay? So for us, as far as the drinking one goes, it's like if you are a 50-year-old in the flex program, if you're not getting drunk, you can have a beer where you're barbecuing, okay? But for our students in our housing, we don't have any alcohol in our housing, okay? And so there is different, and obviously if they're looking to be credentialed with the Assemblies of God, pastors cannot drink in the Assemblies of God. So lifestyle agreement, very clear, have that made, have it ready to go. And then internship syllabuses, okay? We have a bunch of different internship tracks at our church. So we have a different syllabus for worship, a different syllabus for youth. We have worship, youth, kids, creative, production, pastoral care are kind of our intro internships, and then as they get to second, third year, we have other more specific internships for certain students that are maybe studying counseling, or even we had a coffee shop internship for our business students that were interning in the coffee shop, so we had a specific syllabus for that. This syllabus, if you pull up your phone, this is for our one internship, and it's a cool name for basically an overview of the whole church. And so this is something that we tried out. We're in the process, like we don't have everything figured out. We're in the process of trying new things to continually make things better. It wasn't necessarily bad before, but before we just put them right into youth worship kids. And now we have this one internship where the first semester they get an overview of the whole church. And so it was a risk, and it worked really well. Like, it was great. I had them as my interns. I was able to keep track of them. We did 2 weeks of worship, 2 weeks of kids, 2 weeks of youth. We traveled and visited our other campuses. It was very observation focused, but there was a lot of discussion, a lot of philosophy of how we do worship, how we do kids, how we do youth ministry. And so that was that one internship that we did. So orientation. The first week of school is the most important week of school. Okay, if you learned one thing from me this morning, learn that. Okay, you are going to make your first impressions. They are going to either be set up for success or not, depending on how that first week of school goes. In my master's program, there was a doctor named Harry Wong that does a great teaching from like the 70s, and I highly encourage you to read his book. It is about classroom management, but he talks about the first week of school, and it's for like middle school, high school, but there's a lot of principles that I've taken out of that to help establish policies, procedures, routines, things right off the bat with your students. And so you want to be able to set them up for success for orientation week. Have a plan before it starts. And like for us, we have this opportunity where we can go to a campground and we get to just spend an overnight with our students and hear each other's stories and sit around campfires. If you have a smaller group, you can still do this. Okay, when I was in Oregon and I had just 3 interns, my wife and I took them over to the beach for the night, and we had a beach house and were able to just really get to know our interns before we had them for the summer. And that just really set up the entire summer for way more success building relationships. So this generation loves experiences. They love experiences. And experiences don't always require money, okay? Some like little things, like some of our interns were like, let's have a worship session on the roof of the church, because we have a roof access and you can go up on the roof and you can do worship. How cool is that? It doesn't cost any money, but it's something that they're going to remember forever. So how, like, as you are thinking, as you're planning your orientation week or your internships in general, but like, how can you create experiences that they're going to remember forever? And so that's one of the big things that we try to do for our orientation. I could have brought in different speakers to talk at our orientation, but this year I was like, let's have the students share their testimonies. One, it's great practice for them to get into the public community, like communicating their story. But two, what it did was it took a lot of walls that are up that first week and they just came down. Like we have a student that has a past history with homosexuality and struggle with that. And to when you see him, everyone is like, he's in our program, and they're judging him right off the bat. But then we sit around a campfire, and he shares about how God has radically changed his life and how he's like, living a different lifestyle now. And all you could see, all of the students are like, whoa. And then the whole rest of the year, that student set up for success because he was able to share his story and people connect with him. And what you find out is everyone in that group have weaknesses. We're all in this together. We're all not perfect. Like, you can look good. You can show up at orientation and be like, I'm awesome. But when you hear everybody's testimonies, you're like, whoa, they're all like it. They're all like me. They're all struggling, people that need Jesus, right? And so I think there's so much power in sharing stories. Share your story too. Highly encourage you to share your story. You want to be vulnerable but at the same time, there's obviously some you don't need to share every part of your story, but at the same time, learn how to share your testimony and be that example, because if you share first, then they're going to be more open to share after you've shared. So share stories. Have fun. This week can very easily become business, books, rules, and want to encourage you, make sure you have fun your first week of school. Okay, it's very easy to start talking about all the procedures and show up on time and do all this kind of stuff, but we kind of had to take a step back and go, let's just have some fun. And so our first day of orientation, we do worship, we have Kevin talk, which is fun. We do a huge scavenger hunt. We go to camp, we share some stories. We don't get into the nuts and bolts of our syllabuses and our procedures until like later on in our orientation. Okay, so we start off with fun, create those relationships, but then absolutely, this is the week, this is the time to set your expectations. okay? And so having a syllabus ready, prepared, having a calendar. The calendar should be way before orientation, by the way. I put it on the orientation slide, but your calendar, you should have dialed in way in advance when those students sign up, when they get accepted, when they say they're gonna come. If you did scan my syllabus for my one interns, I had like a link they could click and it opened a Google Calendar and it showed them everything they need to be at, when they need to be at it, and it's kind to them because then they can get a job and they can, as they're applying for jobs, they can tell, hey, I can't be there Sunday, I can't be there Monday, I can't be there Wednesday, and so if you want your students' time, make sure that's very clear before they even show up, and then continue to communicate that. I send it out Instagram. I made an Instagram group and sent that calendar out and that syllabus out. I emailed it. We hit it again at orientation. So you want to over communicate, and that's something I was going to talk about later. But you can't communicate enough with students. Okay, over communicate with them. Over communicate. Calendar is huge, and then obviously that lifestyle agreement. My first year, we kind of took more time and walked through every little thing and explained every little thing. What I do now is as our new students come in, we have a little bit of time to go over it with them. The students that are already been in the program, I don't make them sit there in a 2-hour talk about the lifestyle agreement, but we hand out the lifestyle agreement to everyone, say, you need to sign it, turn it back in. If you have any issues with it, talk to us. Like, come talk to me if you have an issue with it. Like, I'd rather have you communicate to me that you have a problem with this than just sign it and not communicate. So definitely got to talk business, but you want to have some fun for your orientation as well. Next slide. So for our internships, there are required activities that we have. Our chapel, we have about 30 students at our chapel, 25, 30 students, and that is every Wednesday. It's a requirement. We have different guest speakers that come from our church, but also outside of our church. We have youth pastors from around the area. We've got but different pastors on our staff that will come share. We have time of worship. This year, we actually started doing small groups because we were a group of about 30, and so we broke them down into groups of 6 and have small groups that meet before we do worship and a message. But that's something that is required. You can count chapel towards your internship hours, okay? So that is a instruction time. We also have quarterly parties during chapel, and Kristen's going to talk a little bit more later about what we do for those, but we do quarterly parties during our chapel time. And then also, we invite all of our interns to our staff meeting. Now, not every church is going to be able to do this, but like you met Kevin yesterday, he's all on board with the CSM program. And so we have probably 60 people at our staff meeting because we have our interns and our whole staff there. And so he does some phenomenal leadership training with them. And then after that initial all staff meeting, then they break out into different groups like the gathering team and things like that. So it's pretty cool that our students are allowed to come to our staff meeting, observe that, and get that leadership training from Kevin, and just hear more about the culture of our church and I feel like a part of that. So that's Monday morning. And then obviously their internships are required activities, and all of those internships do look different. We try to keep all of our internships on Monday, Wednesday for work schedule and just to keep everyone on the same schedule. But every once in a while, the creative team is filming a video on Thursday. And so what I communicate to the intern lead there is if you're going to require them to be there on a different day other than Monday, Wednesday, you got to let them know way in advance. You got to make sure you're communicating that because they also have to make money so they can pay for all this. So internships, and then this is something we just started doing this year, is we have 4 community events a year that are required. And we've seen a great success with this. We did a awards night. It was kind of like a funny awards night. It wasn't like a serious awards night. We called it the Plungies after the office. Dungies. But anyways, we had everyone dress up. It was formal. We had a great dinner and some funny time giving out funny awards. And so that was cool. But we also are doing a service project with our program this spring. It's a requirement. So I've communicated like months in advance. The whole school, we're all going to go serve this day. Make sure you have work off that we're going to be serving in the community. And then graduation, I want every single student at graduation, and I want every single student in orientation. So that's it. Like, that's all I say outside of internships. I want the entire school to be a part of these 4 events, and I really press that and make sure that everyone comes to those, which is hard to do. It's hard to do because, especially and we encourage our flex students to come to those and say, hey, we want everyone to come. Flex students are hard to get. Does anybody have a hard time getting their flex students to show up to stuff? Yeah? Okay, I was talking to some people earlier, and they're like, it's just hard to create community with those flex students, and it is, because they're flex for a reason, right? So, anyways, those are the required activities. Next slide. These are optional activities. These do not count towards credit or anything like that, but this just helps create a healthy culture and environment. And I would say, too, like, we're a big enough program, we can do some of this stuff, but you have things like this in your church. You probably have a church softball league. Advertise that. If you've got a student that just came off playing softball and you're like, hey, we've got a church softball team, and they're like, oh, really? That's awesome. That sounds fun. Okay? And even if you have 2 students play on the church softball team, that's a win. It just gives them something to do that's like extracurricular. Okay? So we did a city league flag football team. We actually had 13 students, 13 guys play flag football in a city league. They called it the beer league because in Montana, everybody drinks a ton before they play flag football. And so we showed up to this, and our guys are getting like cussed at, but we were a great example of sportsmanship to our community, and it was a good outreach as well as it was a lot of fun. So this, for basketball, we decided, let's make our own basketball league. And so we're doing 3-on-3 basketball, and I've got 17 young adults and CSM students signed up for basketball. I am also the young adult pastor at Canvas, and so we're renting the skating rink out. That's just a fun event. It's not required for my CSM students, but it's just another fun thing to add in there. We had a corn maze this fall where we had 35 young adults and CSM students show up to the corn maze. And so we're doing a ski day for the first time coming up on a Thursday. Once again, it's not required. It's optional, but I wanted to supplement that. So I tried to find the cheapest ski option out there, and then I gave them $5 off of that as well. So they can go skiing for a very cheap price, and I'm hoping to get I have no idea. We might get 3 students. We might get like 15. We might get 30. I don't know. But then also promo trips. Promo trips can be a lot of fun. And we try to mix work with fun for promo trips, but the districts, Montana district, Washington district, Oregon district, they love it when you call them and say, hey, I've got college students that want to come help with your youth convention. I've got college students that want to come help with your summer camp. They love that. And so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll give you a time to promote your program. They'll give you a little spotlight on the stage or even let you play a promo video. And so we'll bring teams. We actually were here in Washington, in Edmonds, just a few months ago, promoting our school, but also just helping serve the district. I want CSM to be a program that helps serve the Assemblies of God districts as well. And so that's something that we do to help promote, but it's, like I said, it's fun for our students too. They get to come to Seattle. And so for kids in Montana, that's awesome. Or they get to go to Billings, or they get to go to Oregon. And so we help plan that and do that. So next slide. I want to leave you with 9 tips for an awesome internship. And I'm not going to talk super long about these things, but I want to hit all of them real briefly here and then have an opportunity to ask questions. The first one is show your interns you care about them. You care about your interns. I know you do because you're doing this job. But one thing I have had to ask myself is, do my students know that I care about them? And every student is different. You got to learn, you got to steady your students. How do they respond to different love languages? I think we've heard of the love language thing before. There's all the different love languages. But what is their love language? Do they like gifts? Do they like words of affirmation? Do they like quality time? What is their love language? And then give that to them. I think a lot of us tend to give what we like. So if you like words of affirmation, you're going to give your students words of affirmation. That's great, but figure out what it is that they like. If they like gifts, give them a little note that's a little gift with it or something. So I just want to encourage you, show your interns that you care about them. Number 2, have a plan. I think a lot of internships fail because they don't have a plan. And so even if you don't have to have everything written out, you don't have to have every session planned out word for word. If you'll see in my internship syllabus, the one internship, I had life skills mixed with church stuff. So I would talk in my internship about youth ministry, but then I would also have a half an hour discussion on how to change a tire of your car. okay? Or how to have a budget, or how to have a calendar. And so I think it's okay to teach some of those life skills, but having a plan for your internships. When are you meeting? Who's gonna speak at your internship? Over communicate your expectations. I mentioned that earlier, but it's so serious. Like, if you have an expectation for them to be on time, you need to tell them. And then you need to have consequences. It's just basic stuff. Like, if you want them there on time, if they don't show up on time, what happens? That's a question that you got to answer. For me, I'll tell you my answer, but I think it needs to be different depending on your situation and your culture. If you don't care, that's fine too. You have to establish what culture you want and let them know the expectations that you have for them. For us, if they're late to chapel the first time, everyone gets a freebie. Okay, everyone gets a freebie. Second time, then they have a conversation with me, and I find out what's going on. Third time, they write a letter to who was in the front of the room that they walked in late on. And then fourth time, there's a potential that they could lose their internship credit. I go wham, because I want them to be on time. So you can set up those expectations and have it clear. But if you don't make it clear, they'll show up late. Okay, they will. That's just what's going to happen. So make sure you over communicate your expectations. Have expectations. Write those in your syllabus. Talk about them. I already mentioned create experiences. Give healthy feedback. And healthy feedback is a very big part of Canvas Church. When I get up and do hosting, I will come off the stage and I get 3 people giving me healthy feedback and coaching to help me be a better host, which has been great. I've grown a ton. In turn, though, what you have to be careful of is to not become critical and create a criticizing environment where your interns are just getting criticized all the time. And there is a difference of heart there. Are you giving feedback to help your students and to coach them, or are you just giving them criticism? And so I think all of us have that desire to help coach, but I think a lot of times too is we'll say, hey, why don't you preach for youth group next week? And then they get up there, they preach for youth group, and then you don't say anything. That's like the worst thing you can do. Okay, you've got to give here's 4 things you did really good. Here's a couple things you can work on. But as an intern, almost all of the interns want coaching. They want feedback. They want to get better. And so take the time and say, hey, I'm gonna actually critique your preaching and help you become better. So give healthy feedback. Want to encourage you to do that. Creating growth goals. Not every intern is going to come in at the same level of experience. We had an intern this year, first year in my one internship, that was already leading worship on our Kalispell stage in front of thousands of people, and he was the dude. And so now he's coming in as a freshman. And then I've got another person that's just barely learning the piano that's going into our worship internship as well. And so there's a variety of different abilities that are there. Gotta watch my time. So want to encourage you, have growth goals wherever they're at. I think the first phase is observing you. And then the second phase, you can see there's a chart. I put it in my intern leads manual at the beginning of the slide that we'll send out. But there's a level of, first they have to observe you, then they can do it and you observe them. And then eventually they work their way up to the point where they can do it on their own and someone else observes them. And so that's the goal, is you want to get them to grow, to progress. Northwest Requirements actually has 3 different levels of internship. There's the first level, second level, third level, and so you can check that out as well. So growth goals are huge. Don't ask interns to do anything you wouldn't want them to do if you were an intern. Create an internship that you would want to be in. I'll say that again. Create an internship you want to be in. You might say, well, man, I hated when I was an intern. I had to clean out the closet and blah, blah. Don't make your interns do that then. Okay? Create an internship that you would want to be in if you were that age, okay? And I think that you can very quickly get into like, oh, the interns will do that, and then it creates an unhealthy culture of interns just doing all kinds of stuff. Number 8 is invite guest speakers. I am in charge of my interns, but I had a different speaker almost every week. I had Alan Warnicki, who's 70 some years old, that's on our staff, come speak. I had different people from all over the place that would come speak to my interns. And I think that they love that because they love hearing from you, they do. But if they hear your voice, they'll get bored of it, just saying, no matter how phenomenal you are. And so if you can get other voices to come speak into their life, that's a huge win. And then the last one I mentioned earlier as well is teach life skills. It's okay to, that first semester especially, help them bridge that gap from going from childhood to adulthood. So with that, I think that's my last slide. I believe it is. So do we have some time for questions? Sweet. Should we have them text them in, or are we just going to shout them out? We'll just shout them out. Let's do that. Question, yes. That's a phenomenal question. This is a 4-year program, and we have one student. This is our 4th year of our school being open too. So this is our 4th year. But we have one student that's graduating this year that has been here for all 4 years. And so how do you retain students? How do you keep them for 3 years, 4 years? And I think that really establishing the progression of your internships, having a observation one that overviews the whole church, for us, kind of let them hold the carrot out there a little bit, and so they didn't just jump right into worship. And then I think when they get in the worship internship, it should be an overview of worship, but then maybe third year, 4th year, they could get more into like songwriting or, and so like creative track. I'm trying to establish where first semester they're in creative, they get an overview, they get the website and graphic design and video, and they get an overview of all of it. But then 3rd, 4th year, they get video specific or website specific. And so that's something I'm trying, but honestly, that's a phenomenal question, because if they intern in youth for 4 years at your same church, you could have an intern in youth for 4 years doing the same, but especially with the Northwest requirements too, is we want to progress them up. And so if they're doing more observation that first year, that's okay. But then as they progress through your youth internship, by the end, they should be leading the games. They should be preaching. They should be running the trip and taking kids to winter camp. And you want to get your interns to be in a place where if you're done and you're gone, can they replace you? Do they know enough so that if you were to leave your position, could they take your job? But yeah, hopefully that answered that question. Yeah. Great question. Our intern leads write our syllabuses. So I give them an example syllabus, and then we have them write their own syllabus. I give them a lot of freedom of when they're meeting and the requirements and all that, and then they send them into Lori, and we keep track of them there. Yeah. Yes. So when you have a large staff, how do you ensure quality? For me, we have once a year an intern leads meeting, and I have Kevin bring a quick word at the beginning to just remind everyone why we're doing this, because interns are a lot of work. And so he kind of sets that tone, and then what I was able to do is get up and share some of these similar things of like, hey, we want to make sure we're letting our interns know that we care about them. We want to make sure that we have a plan, and so I kind of did it in teaching with the intern leads, and that was, we made it a lunch, so it was fun. There was food. You always got to bring food if you're working with a big staff. They will come if you have lunch. And so we had a lunch. But the other thing that's important is I meet one-on-one with the intern leads as well. And I do that periodically to check in with them. I think a lot, like for worship leader, for instance, they are thinking about a million other things other than their interns. But if I say, hey, can I have lunch with you? What happens is they sit down with me for lunch, and it gives them a full hour to think about their internship. And then they start coming up with ideas, and they start going, well, we're not really great in this area. We need to be better in this area. And I'm like, I don't have to tell them what to do. They know. But what I do is I give them an opportunity to just pause from their life, focus on their internship, whether that's over a cup of coffee or lunch, and then that ends up like getting a lot of positive results out of that. So, and that is a lot of work to go meet with all the intern leads and stuff, but cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate having your time. I'm excited to hear about your programs as well, so I'll be coming around and talking to you to get some ideas myself. And thank you, Becca, for this opportunity. Thank you, Venture Church, for having us here at this conference, too. I really appreciate you guys hosting it. So at this time, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break. And we'll actually, do you want to do 10-minute break, Becca? Okay, 11:05, we're coming back. Have a good break.